committee meeting to order for Tuesday, April 8th at 6:03. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Peter Talbot.
Here.
Jim Jinks. Here. Dina Allard.
Here.
John Mylone.
Here.
Greg Wolf. Don Walsh.
Here.
David Belliver.
Here.
Fiona Pearson.
Here.
And Tricia Kramer. A quorum is present.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we're going to continue our proposed FY 25-26 operating and capital budgets. Tonight is our second opportunity to sit with the education department, and I'll turn it over to Jeff and Vin.
Thanks a lot, Peter. And Jimmy behind you too, if you don't mind. So, first of all, thanks again for your attention this evening. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a little color and background to the correspondence we've had. I don't know, it was probably a week and a half ago. Time is kind of a blur lately, but the question was asked at the last budget presentation we made, or shortly thereafter, to share, what the reductions, what the budget would look like, just cutting down to contractual. I shared that. I think it was about $1 million, and then Peter recently, as recently as Friday, asked, what can we do to get that to $2 million? And so what you have before you is line by line. I tried to, put in red some of the things that were subsequently updated from the original proposal that I had sent you on line 113. It's the teacher line. We reduced 3 classroom teaching positions, a half-time position for MLL, we call it, multi-language learners, that support students and staff. That's an area where we've had a lot of growth and enrollment. We assumed 6 retirements at $25,000 per retirement. The question was asked, what is basically the delta in our retirements, and I shared that, unfortunately with the dearth of teachers coming out of college, we used to factor $50,000, and I shared with the group that it's under 30 now in terms of the delta, because we're having to hire people with experience to fill positions rather than people out of university with little to no experience. So
Jeff,
those are factored in. Yep.
Not to interrupt you, but the
Yep.
one you sent out previously and this one you just handed out today, can you just explain to me the difference? I don't see it quickly, so I see the minus 440 here, but I don't know where you're getting it, so I'm just trying to understand.
That's in the red. The red font should kind of highlight where the changes are.
So it's the teachers, you started with a budget of, you went from 39 to 37 in this new revised budget. That's what you're saying?
No.
Okay, explain to me what you did.
So the budget for 24-25 was 37. That's this current
Yes.
year that we're in.
Yep.
The board had approved 39 million on that line,
okay.
correct? That's the change in there is 2.1 million
Yeah.
for 5.68. We're reducing that line by $440,000 now.
Okay, so I don't see it
There's
here, I
not
just
a
see it in a
total.
reduction.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
there's just
so
the
it's just a
reduction.
440, okay.
The
I was looking
reduction.
for it here, but I didn't see it there. All right, now I understand.
And sure, and I wanted to just highlight that those, if you continue on the next cell, John.
Yep.
The items in red are the deductions beyond what we had initially, what I had shared with you guys most recently. The areas where we made further cuts to bring that number down. So if you continue on down to student activities, this isn't necessarily a deduction in the spending on that line as much as it is an increase in the activity fee to generate $12,000 revenue. We're increasing the activity fee.
Can you explain
by $10.
what the activities fees
Sure.
is?
Yeah, so there's a good description of it in the book, but they any students who are participating in interscholastic sports pay an activity fee. 130 is
It'll
the
be what you're recommending.
yeah, and it'll be no, it's what it is now,
Oh, it's
and then it'll go to 140. In the book, there's a page that shows a cap on that. There's a family cap. It's higher for ice hockey.
Yeah, that's what you say.
You know, that would go up by
I saw that.
$10. You know, so across the board, we would elevate that fee by $10. It's in the revenue
Do
page.
you know what other school systems are charging? Are
Yeah.
we
Yeah, we're in
higher,
that.
lower?
We're in that neighborhood. I
Okay.
know I have a spreadsheet
Okay.
somewhere from the last time we pulled it, probably last year.
Okay.
So it's on the is that the revenue tab, Vin?
No, it's
No, it's certified
It's
staff
certified
tab.
under student activities, but the cap is $125. It's
actually
$130 per
$130.
student per sport. Ice hockey is $225. There's a $350 cap per student for the year, and there's a $550 cap per family for the year, and it's all extracurricular activities. So it may
So-
not be sports, it's music and any other activities
So if they
that
play
are after school.
football, baseball, basketball, they pay 3 different fees, or?
Correct.
With a cap
With a
of
cap of-
550
okay.
currently,
Okay.
but that would go up.
Yep.
You know, so there's a it says potential reduction, but that's is described in the comments. That's a increase in revenue actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
The-
this line's budgeted net though, so, we would actually
Right.
reduce that line by the
Right.
12,000.
Okay.
Paraeducators, line 116. This assumes a reduction in 5 positions at a savings of $25,000 per. We've had historically, more recently, it's been more difficult to fill those positions, and so we've been short there.
Yeah, I know that has been an issue. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that a little bit? Because that is a cut that I'm concerned about, because I know
just
the
a-
para-educators are
I'm concerned about them all, but
incredibly-
and I know
Yeah.
you are too, but that's a function of just not having an applicant pool. Or when we do have an applicant pool, it isn't somebody that we would want around our students, just not a good fit for the role. And so, we're not gonna hire somebody that, just because they're a person
Right.
to fill a hole. So unfortunately, that means we maybe have to pay overtime someplace or move people around, and
Do you know how our salaries compare to surrounding communities? Because I know
yeah,
that
we
they
just
tend
went
to-
through negotiations, and those, they have representation in that negotiation process. They're competitive. The starting salary is a little different. It depends on the district. So some districts will have one flat salary regardless of the role. Ours there's room for advancement in ours. So there's a base pay that might be somewhat lower. It's not dramatically lower, but lower than a district who's paying one flat fee. But we have room for advancement that many times it excels. Yeah, if you want to, for example, be somebody who's a ABA discrete trial paraeducator that's providing intervention supports for students with more significant needs. If you're involved in personal care for a student, there's a higher pay for that. Then, you just went through the negotiations
Well,
process, or
we're just
currently in it.
Started negotiations, and we only talked about wages for the first time last week at our meeting. There's no doubt at the starting pay, we're right at minimum wage. Because when we negotiated the current contract 3 years ago, we thought we had lots of room. We knew that the minimum wage was going up. What we didn't count on is the annual incremental automatic adjustment that takes place from the state, which has been basically 4% each of the last 2 years. So as we're negotiating this contract, we have to come up quite a bit to make sure that we stay at or above minimum wage. So we've fallen behind our peers with respect to starting salary, but we're ahead of our peers because we have this second tier
It's
for the
tiers.
highly trained people that work with more, the students that have more needs.
In part, that's why that line went up 8%,
Right.
because of the minimum wage increases. And we know that we're gonna have to negotiate at least to that minimum wage, in the next contract, which won't go into effect until next
July 1?
July 1 this year.
For this budget.
Yeah.
Jeff, can you just clarify, is this a reduction in the current staffing for
Yeah.
paraprofessionals? So
Right.
there would be an elimination of positions of currently,
5 positions.
5 positions that are currently there, not a,
Currently there, they may not be filled.
oh, okay.
In every case, I think most cases, they probably aren't filled. I think we have 4 openings right now.
So potential elimination of
potential
one paraprofessional.
Person, yeah.
Could you explain that though, cause you went from a 3.8 to a $4.2 million budget. And now so it's $340,000 increase, which you're taking 125 off, so the 125, you're still increasing the budget dramatically and losing 5 people.
Yeah, because the minimum wage has gone up, and we're just negotiating that contract right now. So we've had to adjust the contract because it wasn't hitting minimum wage. As the minimum wage increased, we had to elevate salaries there.
Could you just, how many
Follow.
paraeducators do you have, and how many hours is that it comes out to that kind of money for a few dollar change in minimum wage? I'd like to see it.
Sure, John, it's in the book.
It's in the staffing
I'm sure it's
section
in
of the
there.
book.
So on page 2 of the staffing piece, we have a total of 162.4 FTE, full-time equivalent.
So you have 162 people, so you're eliminating 5 out of 162?
No, it's actually more than that, because there's 162 that are special ed. There's 26 paraeducators that provide classroom services that are not special ed. And then there's 11.5.
To provide reading and math
So
interventions.
it's around 200. So 5 out of 200.
5 out of 200.
Right, but we're seeing growth in the schools, so we're seeing growth in enrollment,
Right.
and we're
Well,
looking to
and
cut 5
special education
paraeducators.
services, yeah. Special education services have grown too.
Those positions are currently filled? No.
No, not all 5.
Any of them?
I think I was just saying about, I think 1,
One, okay.
but one of them is filled now. By the end of the year, we have turnover out of 200 people. Wouldn't be shocked if one person were to leave or not. You know, and the position just wouldn't be filled.
Do the special ed paraeducators get a higher salary than the others? Is
In
that-
some cases, yeah, it depends on
They
the
don't have
role.
steps like the teachers do, they? Or do
They don't have steps per se. They have different assignments that have different pay scales.
Okay. So it looks like roughly, 2611, it was about 200.
Right. Yep.
So 200 at 30 hours a week times 10 months.
Are you trying to figure out how much they get paid?
No.
I mean, 'cause we could tell you that too. I mean, the contract is on our website under
Yeah,
Human
$40
Resources.
an hour.
Well, and
something like
again,
that.
it's blended too, because a ABA, DCI paraeducator is making over 20 an hour.
Yeah, I mean, if you have questions or anything about the contract, it's on our website under Human Resources. All of our union contracts are there, so you could certainly check that out to get a sense of what's the starting rate, and then what's the, what advancement opportunities are there. So, continuing along, the The contractual increases are the next several lines under maintenance.
Before we flip the page, Jeff, I want to ask about substitutes real quick. I was hoping we would discuss
Sure.
possibly a lower number there, but it looks like you've gone from, in 2023, 24, from that 1.1 down to 840 or so. What was the kind of narrative, why did that come down so much? Why did we bring it down so much? Was that hopeful?
I think it's more hopeful. We're overexpending that in this budget cycle. I think our projection, do you not have that?
Yeah, well, that also
up?
has to do with how many teacher absences do
Right.
we have. So if we have teachers that are out, we'll be under budget in teachers and over budget in substitutes. So we tend to under budget substitutes, but they offset against any teacher long-term absences that aren't getting paid.
That would be a long-term absence for a team. When he says teachers being out, that would be like a maternity leave where eventually FMLA runs out and they're not collecting pay. So that would be a reduction on that line, but it's often deferred onto the substitute line in that respect. So on the next page,
Before you go there, just
Sure.
quickly on the drivers represent,
Those are Board of Ed drivers.
they're not bus drivers.
They're Board of Ed bus drivers. We have our own fleet of 12 vehicles, and our drivers drive those vehicles because it's less costly than having DATCO.
So the DATCO is
Do
all
our
DATCO,
runs.
they're bus drivers and their buses. This is just,
This
This
is
is
just
ours.
on our
Yeah.
payroll.
A lot of that is special education runs.
Mhm.
Contracting for special education transportation, you probably heard about it, at the state level, is incredibly expensive. So it's significantly more cost effective for us to provide the transportation ourselves. Vast majority of it is in town, local, or to Quinnipiac for the transition program that we have there, which is also statutorily required up to age 22.
what does it mean when you say market demand cost increase? What is that?
That you can't hire a bus driver at minimum wage. That it'd be impossible, because if you have that driver's license, you just go anyplace else that will pay you wildly more. The bus drivers are not, exorbitantly paid by any stretch of the imagination, but you can't pay minimum wage in that role anymore. You've probably heard that too about the driver shortages that have existed. We've been able to maintain transportation for all of our students, but we have to pay much closer to market rate for that.
I just have another question about the support. Reflects newly hired assistant COO,
Yep.
and 2 new speech language assistants. But that position was last year, wasn't it? Was it the year before, or is this a new position this year that you're adding? Because it's 214,000 increase.
So we had a different position that we reduced, and then it's basically shifted over to the assistant COO, where Vin will be phasing out his time over the course of the next year, down from full-time to retired.
Okay.
But the bulk of that increase, there's wage increases,
Right.
but it's also due to the speech language assistants. That's the bulk of.
Because we, through IEPs, are required to provide that service. To hire a speech and language pathologist is north of $100,000. We can hire assistants that have training, but don't hold the same certification. So the person who does hold the certification coaches those people on what interventions are necessary. They've been trained to provide those interventions, and so they'll do it in a more cost-effective way.
So but, I mean, I don't know how much of that is, because newly hired assistant COO, but that was a position that was started a year ago too, right? Or are you transitioning what she was hired for before?
Emily started in January.
Right,
But
okay,
there was an administrative position that we didn't fill,
okay.
and
Right.
the assistant COO took that same
You-
salary.
Instead of replacing the other admin, correct?
Right.
So the assistant COO is gonna get a higher salary. Your salary I saw is reduced. How much you working this year, Vin?
October, I go part-time.
So we're gonna pay for 2 COOs though for this year. As much as I love you around, we're gonna pay for 2 the rest of this year.
Transitioning.
Transitioning, but you transitioned all last year too.
Not all last year.
I thought the person was here all last year.
No, the position started January of this year, so 25.
It was in last year's budget.
The,
You see-
last year we had Mike Woods in a administrative role. He left.
Mhm.
We, in January, hired Emily as the assistant COO in this year,
Current year.
in this current budget year, the 24-25 budget year.
It was in last year's budget though.
We had an
Assistant
admin,
COO.
we had Mike's admin job in there. When did he resign?
July.
July, okay.
So I mean that he would have been in there
1 month into the.
for that year, and then we transitioned because the role that Vin plays, and I know you love him. We don't have depth in our organization to just be able to move somebody in, and so the transition is critical for our fiscal well-being, for our organizational well-being.
Mhm.
So we made the determination as a board to transition somebody in.
Mhm.
And that's why Vin will, effective October, start pulling back days of the week until he's off and that budget is expended.
But my role will be on the new school, move-in, redistricting, doing that work. So my role changes, I won't stay as, you won't have 2 COOs.
Can we pay you out of the new school budget?
Well, you could try
I mean, it's.
talking to Rich Gussenberg about that,
think
but
we
I don't
should.
think so.
Oh, you're helping them.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a
Well-
reimbursable cost, but
Yeah, I know.
It's helping the district, actually, to do the plan for the move-in to 2 new schools out of 3 buildings, working the redistricting. That's the plan.
yeah, the logistics of that, along with redistricting that we'll have coming up in the next several months, it's a lot, and it's especially when you're doing 2 buildings. So, not to mention making sure the books are all right. We're preparing the budget in the fall for next year, which is obviously again going to be a little bit sophisticated. So, he'll be supporting that in a part-time way.
No, we think Vin's invaluable and we love that he's here still and we're just trying to
Yeah,
make sure we're not paying for,
Yeah. So yeah.
for duplication that we don't have to pay for because,
Yeah.
no other reason.
Well, like I said,
Yeah.
my pay is going down commensurate with the reduction in hours, so.
I think you should volunteer for your job.
I volunteer for other things,
Jeff, just out of an abundance of curiosity, why are we required to have a full-time nurse at St. Bridget's?
It's statutory.
It is,
To
the
be able-
state.
yeah, we have to
It's-
provide
Same with buses.
nursing services. We have to also provide transportation
Okay.
to students
And nursing.
who live
Busing
in
and nurses.
special ed services.
Imagine if they didn't have
Okay.
that school and what would happen to our school system then.
Yeah.
You get 300 more kids in this.
Yeah.
True.
Jeff,
I
as
don't
far
know
as
if
the,
we don't have 300 Cheshire kids. I don't think.
Or 200.
as far as the reductions of the classroom teachers, that's a reduction, the ones that you're planning to add, or these are actual reductions?
It's a combination. So it's the one position is a teacher we were adding to address enrollment at the elementary grades. Another is a health PE teacher that we were adding because of our increased sections at the elementary schools. And the third is the chemistry position at Cheshire High School, which may or may not be the chemistry position when all is said and done, but in order to, you know, over the weekend come up with $2.2 million or $2 million, whatever it is, you know, I had to come up with something in part of that draft. So it's ultimately, you know, the board will evaluate which position, you know, to get to the number that whatever you guys identify, but it'll be at least 3 teaching positions.
But at the elementary level, it says highest level since 2011. What is that number?
It'd be 19 students.
19.
Yeah. Any other questions on the front page while we're there? Before I prematurely flip to page 2.
So just so we understand, you were at a $3.2 million change. No, from 52 to 57, so how big was the change from, let's see, 52?
So those numbers are subtotals, you know, from each section. So you have certified salaries, which went up by 2.4 million. You have non-certified salaries that went up by 800,000. The grand total at the bottom of the page is 3.2 million.
Now you're taking
Taking
off of
about
that.
But now you're
everything
taking
on the right.
everything on the right-hand side is coming off of
Okay.
that.
So it's about a $2.5 million
So
increase.
now it's 2.5. And that's over last year, or that's over last year?
Over last year,
Over
right?
last year,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
And I apologize, I should have been listening better. So, but these are the teacher reductions, these were additions to your last budget?
In some
The 3,
places, yeah.
the 0.5 and
The
Chem?
2.5 were additions. The chemistry position is not an addition. That's a position that we currently have, where the individual is retiring. But I don't know if it'll be that chemistry position. It may be a different position that we ultimately decide when we evaluate enrollment a little more fully.
Right,
Those numbers are just coming in now in Cheshire High School, so
right.
we'll have to evaluate that. But for the sake of trying to pull this together, I went with that position. So you can't assume that is one of the 6 retirements, the eliminating the position, but there would have to be an additional 6 retirements.
And right now you have no retirements?
Other
on
than the chemistry one, though.
Just the 1.
Right.
So we're banking on 5, otherwise we'd be looking at cuts and increased classes.
Well, you're banking on 6 in addition to the one that we already have, because you can't count that twice. The next page is our medical benefits line. There's there's really no room to move that. We are using estimates, initial estimates, with pension, just like I'm sure the town is, and workers' comp, as well as medical benefits. So, we won't have those final numbers, we don't believe, until after the budget is resolved, but those were initial estimates. Vin, anything you want to add on that?
No, Jim and I just made eye contact. We still don't have the pension estimate. I just budgeted, 5%, and workers' comp at 8%, but those could change a bit.
So it's a big number, obviously. It's a big percentage of the salaries. Jim and I I asked him for some clarification on some of this, and we're having some discussions about some alternatives there that might help at least the overall budget. But how much of that is for people that are retired that we're still covering?
You're talking about on the pension line, John?
Oh, and health benefits as well.
We have, I don't know, we count on the actuaries to provide us the estimate, and that estimate is gonna include paying out whoever's retired. since we shut down the pension plan to new employees in 2015, you know, we're below 100 employees that are still participating in the pension plan, and a lot more employees that are in the defined contribution plan. So that's a Jim and an actuary question, but.
What about the medical benefits?
Cause some are
John was
medical
asking
benefits as well, right?
No, after they retire,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they don't stay on our plans.
There's no one on medical benefits after they retire.
They could stay if they did early retirement to Medicare age, and then they're off.
So
So
there's
we
no
don't
one on
carry
anymore?
anybody past Medicare age.
But there's people that retire before, but Medicare is 65, I don't even know what it is for sure.
65. So
People that
would
retire
the
before
administrators, if a administrator retired, they can buy onto the plan, right? Until
Only
65.
until Medicare.
Right,
Only
until 65. That's a small number, but
It's a small number.
yeah, maybe 2, 3. If I'm estimating, I'm
okay.
trying to think of people that have retired.
No, that's fine, I'm just trying to get,
Yeah,
it's such a massive part of the
Oh my
budget.
God.
And if you look at the percentage of your overall salary cost, it's, I mean, look at
If
the
you
number.
look at, I shared a graph last year that illustrates that fact incredibly well. I'll update it. The percentage of our budget that's dedicated to medical benefits has dramatically increased. Everything else has been squeezed to accommodate that number. And that's not a Cheshire problem. That's an American problem. You know?
I know that, but. and
Though we
looked
still
at
have to
every
solve
other
it here.
alternative-
Yeah.
Cause it doesn't seem.
We looked
like
at the
this
state
instance
plan.
are
Yeah,
partially
regionalization, how'd that look this year?
The state plan?
Regionalization, yeah,
Yeah,
sharing,
it's more expensive for us to do the state plan
then this year's
than
number two.
than it is to do self-insured.
It was.
We checked last year with some private plans too, didn't we, or a year or two ago?
A few years ago, we shopped the
Self-insured.
the
with
self-insured,
yeah.
facilitation.
I would suggest doing
we
that
had
again
Anthem
this coming
forever.
year to try, just to see, I mean, it doesn't hurt to check every few years just to see if there's, making
Well-
sure that,
What were we shopping recently where we said, was the,
Stop loss?
it wasn't just stop loss, it was, liability insurance, I think, weren't we looking at liability? There was something else that we reached out just recently on, hey, we got the original, which was very competitive, but over the last several years, it's crept back up.
I know that this year's liability, Orchestra is telling us that we need to increase our liability from 5 to 10 million for large, they call them nuclear claims. That's both on the town and the school side, but
what is
It
the
was
stop
something
loss,
else.
what's the number that is, when they get to a point where,
175,000 and
In,
over.
in an individual claim for somebody.
and I guess if you reduce it, you would pay more, if you increase it, it's less.
Yes.
And I'm just curious to see how many over 175 are there? I mean, and do they go well over 200, like that 175 to 200? Do we look into saying, increasing it to 200, because those, once they hit 175, they're gonna go over 200, and maybe, I don't know if we save something there, I don't know, I mean, it's just,
Yeah, it's the same as your auto insurance, if you increase your deductible a little bit, you know, it's a calculated risk.
but you can
and-
figure out how many
Yeah,
employees
sure.
have
I mean,
gone
there's
over that
data.
175, and then, once they hit that 175, do most of them all go over 200?
Yeah,
And if we're paying at 175, might as well go up to 200 on it, just to,
probably something we can ask
Okay.
Tom Kowalczyk, our,
We do that.
our rep, I'm sure we,
do that review every year with stop
Yeah.
loss. And it is, you know, it's just a question of how much more risk are you gonna take on those claims.
Yep.
But, I mean, it's a good thought. And just to give you a sense, family coverage right now, you know, on the school end, I think the same is true on the town side. Family coverage with our high deductible health plan, including the board's contribution, is about 30,000. That's not our cost, cause the employee pays, you know, anywhere between 14 and 18% of that. But it's 30,000 to cover a family under a high deductible health plan. If you look at the state partnership plan, family coverage is somewhere around $40,000. So it's more expensive. It is a fixed premium,
But no deductible.
but there is no deductible. That doesn't necessarily
that's
help
a
us.
town cost.
Because if you look at cost to
But
cost,
it could
it's about,
reflect that maybe in a salary differential, because deductibles can be up to $7,000 a year. then that's
Good
just
luck
for,
negotiating that.
that's
Oh, we're
just
gonna
for-
lower your salary.
that's just for healthcare, that's not even including prescription, and prescriptions can be astronomical. So I'm wondering where the seesaw is on that, where you,
You're talking about without high deductible?
so I've been on both types of plans, a high deductible, where we're paying out of pocket, plus purchasing the lower, the lower cost healthcare
Mhm.
plan. So, times change, I get a higher cost, better healthcare plan with no deductible. It winds up saving the employee a ton of money, even though I'm paying a little bit more for the health insurance. So, you're saying it's a $40,000 per family difference, which spread over 9 months is, definitely not cheap. Is there any state buy-in on that?
It's a $10,000 per family delta.
Increase?
Yeah.
Yeah, from 30 to 40.
Yeah.
And that could be what they're paying out of pocket now for their health insurance outside of what they're paying monthly.
It's still, yeah, I hear
our
what you're saying, it's
deductible
still
isn't
more
that high.
expensive. When our
could be
cost
net.
gets to 40,000, then it's time to seriously consider the state plan. We're just so far under that, fortunately.
But my point is, yes, I do understand that. But if you're saving, if the town is spending 10,000 more per person on health insurance, I'm saying maybe there's a nexus somewhere where you can find a negotiation, the yearly salary that they're paying, because their healthcare costs will come down considerably. That's all.
But you're asking to deduct the $10,000 off
Not,
their salary?
not
or-
necessarily. Well,
How do you make up that $10,000 though, but that we're paying extra?
so in my case, I have health issues. I was maxing out my deductible every year, so I was paying more than $10,000 out of pocket anyway. I'm not saying everybody in the healthcare system does that, and some people don't have to go to the doctors, so their deductible really is a savings for them. But there has to be somewhere in there some room for maybe a money loss on the town, maybe a salary loss, just as you're not paying it in medical benefits anyway, just you're paying it out of pocket to the doctors, to health insurance, so you're not really seeing it.
It's just not fair to the people who aren't hitting that deductible.
Right,
or
and that's,
something.
I'm saying,
Yeah, it's a collective bargaining question,
Yeah.
right?
that's,
That's what I'm
right,
gonna say.
that's
Yeah.
always to be discussed.
You just agreed to a contract terms. I mean, this has got to all be in the
4-year
contract
contract,
terms.
yeah.
The health insurance participation and options are all in there, right? I
Yes.
mean, you can't change those.
No, actually, I think, I wanna say they tried to grieve it when we switched from Anthem to Cigna,
They
but
can
there
even
was,
agree-
there
they
wasn't
can
a
even
ground
agree
for
with
that. Yeah.
Carrier?
There wasn't a grounds for that.
But I mean, the percentage they pay out of salary and things like that are all part of the.
Collective
We
bargaining
can't, we
agreement.
can't go and say, we're
Not
dying with health
unilaterally,
insurance this
no.
year, so your participation has to increase, or you've got to
Right.
take a different approach.
Yeah. No,
Could
you-
there be an
I-
individual sign-on thing where someone could choose to pay a different price if they're offered, state insurance is so much better than than other insurance.
I don't know that
In-
it's.
in my
it's-
experience.
Yeah.
Well, it's better, it's a lot more expensive though. That's
Yeah.
the issue.
That, you're asking about
If
an
it's a four-person
individual.
family, it's $2,000 more per year, that's one emergency room visit. But I'm just saying, in the future,
Yeah,
I
you're saying-
definitely think it's
yeah.
something we should look into.
It's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could explore that, with our medical benefits people and
I think Sean's.
the union.
But
I'll
I was just,
just make a point. Sorry,
no, it's
Sean.
fine. I was just gonna answer a question from earlier about shopping. We did 2 years ago in April of '23. We were asked by the council to look at a fully insured alternative as opposed to self-funding our plan. And so this is the renewal from that. At the time, our renewal was the middle column, 19.9 million. And if we had gone fully insured, it was gonna be an additional, it's about $3.3 million more expensive at the time. That was 2 years ago. So we can certainly, we look at this all the time with USI and Tom Walczyk, as we said.
I'm curious to see how much that increases per year versus what this is increasing per year, because, this is 10.94% increase, and
It's still, I mean, we had this, and we can go into greater detail if we'd like, but certainly self-insuring your plan, self-funding your plan is going to be lower cost with the same population because you're not paying any administrative overhead to pay the insurance company to cover all of that. We're funding all of our own claims as a town.
And your employees are paying more out of pocket? No?
It's cheap.
No, it's cheaper.
For the insurance, but not for the doctor's visits and the pharmaceuticals.
Well, we set those rates as part of designing our plan. We designed the plan, and so we have customization over that. And then
And the patients have to go see the doctors that subscribe to that plan. so they meet that, they agree to that price that you're agreeing to pay.
Correct.
Jeff,
So,
oh, sorry,
No, no.
go ahead.
no, so the $1.7 million increase is not, there's nothing there, there's nowhere.
What,
Because that's-
where are you talking, are you talking
Total.
about the total on
Total
the employee benefits? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you.
Yeah, if you just go to the total
Yep,
employee benefits,
yep,
and we can go
yep.
back over all of them, I guess, because I don't think any of the other, they're based on no additional employees. Now, this will come down a pinch because we're potentially, under this scenario, we're looking at a reduction in a few employees, but it's gonna be negligible, I assume. There's nothing there. Is there anything there? I mean, are we missing
No,
anything?
No, and I think, the 1.5 million on the medical benefits, it's pretty tight, that's not gonna increase our reserves. That's just gonna keep us even with our expected claims. And that number we do get from our broker, USI and Cigna. So we are gonna get one more update. I talked to our broker today. March, we don't have March claims in hand yet. We'll probably have them next week. So we'll get one more update from our broker. I don't expect it to change much.
The first few months of the year are usually low, right?
From January,
Of the calendar year. yeah.
Calendar. Yeah.
April, people haven't met their deductibles, so our claims are generally lower.
Tend to be better for the first several months of the year, and then pick up in
September.
summer,
So-
and then most people have met their deductible by that point, and we're on the hook for the whole thing at that point. And then the other, John, within that employee benefits section, the only other places that we'd be looking at are pension, retirement, and workers' comp, which haven't been finalized yet, but the grand total of those two and the increase is $100,000. So, if it's $5,000 either way, it's, relatively negligible in the general cost of the budget. The next section around instructional expenses is where we have a little bit more latitude. I'm sorry,
Did you have something, Jim?
My question was the next section, actually.
Okay, good.
So, they're 15% or more reductions pretty much across the board with the exception of the staff training, which has already been adjusted down, and so it's adjusted down another 5%.
The question I have is the instructional supply and textbooks, software, those two reductions are pretty significant. What
Yep.
does that mean at a classroom level? What is that, what are we going without there?
Classroom libraries, just not updating books or updating software on the schedule that we typically would. Textbook purchases could be deferred. If we're looking at updating a specific textbook, I think we'd have to just take a look at, most of those, if they've been around a while, we might be looking at another year on that.
Are we already, how often have we had to defer that kind of thing? I mean, what generation are we at right now? Are we previous generation, two
I
generations
think
ago?
we try and maintain books and have them updated. And I think the other thing we would do is if there was a resource that was becoming dated, it'd probably be cheaper for us to create supplemental materials to that element of the resource than it would be to buy a full new resource unless it was something, we've seen in recent years the standards have major changes for social studies and science, massive changes where we couldn't possibly do that so independently. So a lot of those resources have been updated. We're putting it off. We have a lot of textbook resources from K-12 across the district, so I don't have in front of me a list of
Generalized.
But looking at that, Joe, you expended $345, you wanted to go to $399, you went to $414, you take away 75, you're at $340. So you're basically paying what you paid previously. You're not adding, but you're not really subtracting on that
Right.
number. You still have the same budget. that you used last year,
Right.
if I'm reading it correctly.
Yeah.
So I don't wanna,
In the year prior,
year prior,
yeah,
okay.
2 years ago, yeah.
Are textbooks still physical, or are you guys really making a move towards electronic?
Oh, we do both, yeah, yeah, I mean,
Is physical
if you're
waning?
buying a physical book, there's not a textbook provider today that doesn't have a digital supplement with that.
Easier
They
to
require
update,
it,
I would
basically,
think.
yeah, there are benefits to it, yeah.
And that moves, I'm sure, gaining,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you cannot you'd be hard pressed to find a textbook resource that doesn't have a digital platform.
less depreciation, less storage needs, less.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we don't buy necessarily a book for every child anymore,
right.
but they ding you for, you pay for the digital license, which is a good thing to your point. It does get updated more regularly, it's much easier to update, but, you're gonna pay for that, and we always buy at least a classroom set, because not every student, it's their modality to be on the screen, so, we're paying for that too in addition, and of course, as much as, they save a lot of money by not doing print editions, the cost hasn't gone down.
comparable.
No, it hasn't done
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, it's
No,
comparable.
we're dealing with this university.
Really doesn't matter.
And I guess my question and concern in this area, just overall, because I know that we're dealing with this at the university right now, I mean, these subscription prices always go up. It's always our data software
Yeah, of
increases
course.
that go up
Yeah.
like 5-10%, these digital companies, right? They're
Right.
making a whole lot of money.
And we're renegotiating
And
with
so
a
when we
couple of
go
companies now.
electronic, yeah. And I know that just looking at the staff training and periodicals and some of the software, just the rise of generative AI, what you're doing to staff train your, I
Yeah.
mean, we're trying to figure it out even at
Yeah.
higher ed, how to deal with generative AI and what all of that is gonna mean in
We
terms
had a
of,
huge professional development for all 400 of our teachers in March.
yeah.
On
I mean, we're back to
generative
handwriting. It's like, put your computers away, because the only way I know if you're thinking is if I know you're actually handwriting
I
right
saw
now.
the greatest thing recently where the teacher will, the assignment will be go home and use AI to create this report, and then they do all of the critical thinking type of questions and editing on the AI report in the classroom.
Yeah,
It's like
problem there,
integrating it.
yeah, I mean, I could go on forever about the problem with
Yeah.
generative
It's
AI
just
right
a
now.
way- you can't fight it forever,
You're
it's
not
a way of
thinking, right? And this is
integrating
what too many students are beginning to think, is that I can use generative AI to brainstorm. Well, now you're already just playing around with whatever has been out on, the internet, and so you're not generating ideas yourself.
not getting rid of
You're
it.
not thinking, and unfortunately, it's those students who have the lowest critical thinking skills that are relying on these tools, right? Rather than those that are tweaking and using it to edit. I mean, my daughter's using it at work right now, and that's with coding, and it's very, very different, right? Because she already knows what she's doing versus students just plopping in prompts and playing around with them and then spitting out papers.
The challenge.
So the challenge
is
for teachers right now in K through 12, and I
there
don't
needs to be
think
critical
we've
thinking
really
involved.
begun to address it. So I guess that's my only concern in this area, is are we proactively, and what school districts are doing proactively to address some of these technologies and some of these challenges in the classroom, because we inherit them when they come into our classrooms.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, that's certainly a part of our professional development experience, working with our staff around making durable tasks, we call them,
yeah.
that's not as susceptible to AI. And so that's a big part of what we do, and the professional development will have to continue. And we'll just, more or less, we won't be relying on outside experts for that, as we did this past March. We'll be doing more in-house.
Yeah, I mean, we've had doctoral students submitting
Right.
AI-generated proposals and then having to go to academic standards because they didn't
University
generate those.
presidents.
Yeah, university presidents relying on, now it's become a problem.
I don't wanna limit
Yeah.
dialogue, but we've got about 7 minutes, so, and I know there's at least one more sheet.
So you saw the reductions there across the instructional expenses. The next, student support services, a lot of special education and kind of ancillary items there. Again, we're waiting on some insurance costs to come in. Again, the grand total on that, of those is about $50,000, so that's not an area where there's massive room, but the telephone, internet service, communications, office supplies, additional supplies, and by the way, again, the definitions for all of these things with detail is in the budget book. If you go to that page, it gives you their definition. I know we're running out of time, but the capital equipment, I just want to bring your attention to that. There's a $65,000 reduction there that's tied really directly to technology that we would be purchasing. 689,000 of that roughly is the energy performance contract. We're contractually locked into that, so that's why we don't have a lot more room for flexibility there.
That's $688,000,
Is the energy performance contract, yeah.
and I mean, that's a substantial, but we save money on that, so that's.
It's offset by
yeah.
utility savings.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was, and we're going through the same process again, because it is beneficial.
It is beneficial.
Yeah,
I thought it
absolutely.
was beneficial, but it's a
Yeah.
substantial amount of budget money, but we don't see the return anywhere. We don't see the savings in the budget somewhere.
If we don't achieve the savings, Amoresco would write us a check.
I know, but if
On
we have,
utilities.
if we've got a $700,000 contract that's in this budget, where's the $700,000 that's not being paid in the utility expense?
Well, we budget the utilities lower based on all the energy performance
So we never
contract
see it.
work that was
You don't
done.
really see it.
It's
I mean,
That's not really helpful, to tell you the truth, to not
Yeah.
see it.
Well, you see it in the reports,
Amoresco,
right?
we
I
see
mean,
it from in
their
the reports,
contract is
yeah.
that this is how much they guarantee they will save, and if they don't, then, so we
I
do
think it's
have
the
that
right thing, but it'd be
information.
nice for people to see that we would have paid this much, and
Yeah.
here's the budget, but we saved this because of that.
Share the report.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
share
share
that
the
for you.
report,
But
yeah.
The
I
report-
understand what you're saying, like, it's not like, oh, okay, wow, look at this connection here.
There's no
that right
connection
in
here,
front of
yeah.
you. But there is,
That's a massive number, and if we don't save
Yeah.
$1 million, then why bother spending $700,000, quite frankly,
Right,
it's not
right.
worth the effort. Maybe we're saving the environment, but right now, I mean, I don't think we have that luxury.
right,
So-
and it's an upgrade too in, like the quality often, but it is, the savings are there, to Vince's point, you just don't see them here, but we could share the report so that you can kind of see but they're not,
You may
it's
have,
not
I
as
just
sexy
may have
as
not
having
found
it
it, but I
built
wouldn't
in.
mind
Yeah.
seeing it if you could,
Yeah.
I'll share it with you. And just understand, the 688,000, that's the monthly payment, that's the annual payment over 15 years we've been paying for all the infrastructure work that was done to, replace the electric heat at Highland and at the high school, install all the computer-controlled LED lighting across the schools. The town also did
There's
a
a
number of
town piece, too.
improvements, so.
The high school library was,
So you couldn't just stop paying that.
No, I know, but
Right.
is that in this year though, or is that, you're saying 600, like it's in this $900,000?
yes,
Yes.
every year,
So how much do you pay every year?
that number,
689,000.
Year after year after year after year?
for 15 years.
It runs out in 15 years, so we're year 12, I think.
Can I just ask one question about this?
That's, I guess that makes sense. I'm sure it makes sense.
Yeah, when you
Boy,
see the
it's-
report, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you see the report.
The $200,000 rollover, the carryover from, is that all of the revenue that was left over, or is that part of what I see that, because that 200,000, where does that come from? And,
The 24-25 school budget that
Right.
we're in right now, we've frozen accounts. A lot of what we have to pay is, by April expended.
right,
And then there's, a lot of it is encumbered with teacher, everybody, all of our employee salaries.
so you're estimating that's what's gonna be left over, or there could be more
Well,
left over?
there's two questions here, Don.
Sure.
First of all, how much can we save? If we could save $1 million, I'm not so sure we would wanna dump it all into our budget. I'm not saying we could come close to $1 million, by the way, but let's say we did hypothetically, right? I'm not sure that you wanna create $1 million fiscal cliff for
No.
26, 27, so there's two questions here. How much can you save, and what's your tolerance for rolling it over?
Right.
And so I could tell you, we can shoot for 200,000, maybe we could get to 250, maybe if everything goes great, 300. But do you wanna roll that over? I don't know.
I don't know either, I was just trying to figure out where we could sit.
So
Hearing that.
I know we have to, just quickly, two other things. Going back to this thing, and I do wanna see the report, I don't know the labor, but if we're spending $680,000 just with them, and our heat and energy costs are $500,000 to $600,000, how much will we spend, we'd spend 3 times?
What would
that?
it be if it, yeah, you're right.
Is
yeah.
it really, I mean,
not-
cause how do we spend 600, if we only have $600,000 left in total that we're spending on energy? That we're
Because
gonna
you-
spend that to save some money on energy, and it makes sense.
It's not just the money that's expended for like the fuel cost, like, cause I think you're thinking of it in that term as well.
Well-
Like just the fuel, but there's the capital improvements as well. All the lighting fixtures and everything that have to be swapped out, and I mean, you could elaborate, I
Okay,
know
that's
the
fine.
report
No,
elaborates.
we don't have time. I'll look forward to the report. One last thing. Pupil transportation, big number. I know it's probably well planned that everything. I look at buses, I rarely see anybody in their buses.
The high school buses are.
They're just empty.
The other buses are
Do we have
filled.
do we have any control to try and consolidate routes or anything like that, or is that not
We-
possible?
Yeah, we do that. The thing is that you have to have a seat if the student is eligible for
I
a seat.
understand that.
And we ask, students, especially at the high school, if we see that a child's not getting on a bus for 2 weeks or so, we do contact the parent and ask them to opt out. They don't have to opt out, so we still have to run the route. And, we do
So
our
the
best to
parents
try
have
and
to opt
reduce
out.
it.
The parents could opt out, and then we don't have to have a seat, correct?
Right.
Right,
So
but
that's a
that
good-
doesn't mean you eliminate the run.
No, but that's a good lesson to let people in this town, if they wanna save some money here, if you're not gonna
Unless
be
there's 2 high
using a
school
bus.
students at that stop.
Yeah, I mean,
You're not gonna
just,
use it.
yeah, just opt
And
out so we can save some. Yeah.
The high school does communicate, and the transportation office does communicate
Yeah.
with families, encouraging them to opt out, because it also makes the run
Absolutely.
faster. If we don't have to stop at your house,
Right.
it's much more efficient, you don't have to get up as early, all those things. But, at the end of the day, we still have to have runs, and then they also transport, the middle and elementary schools are filled.
And over the years, we've consolidated stops, so it's a lot more efficient for students to walk to a bus stop than it is to pick up a student
every
at
door.
every house, obviously. And we've done a lot of that. We've eliminated a couple of runs over the years by doing that work, but now enrollment's increasing,
Right.
so it's not one-to-one, but, as enrollment continues to increase,
that's-
the next
that's
year's
almost-
budget,
But that's
we
almost a
did have to add a
$300,000
run.
increase.
Well,
And we don't have that many
yeah.
more students, so what's, I mean,
we do have to have another bus run added, enough budgeted for next year, plus our contractual increase to DACO for next year is 4%.
This was the last year of the current contract we were in, so we have a new contract for next year, which they were really favorable for us in the last several years. Now we're paying more what the market rate is. And it's still been a good relationship for us. They just bought a building on Route 10, and they're building a maintenance facility, which will save us money in town.
what are we doing with the one that we create a site for them
That's the one that they bought the building
to put on that site?
adjacent to that site, yeah.
But we own that site, we gave them that site,
Yes.
and that I'm sure.
And
this
that's our
factors in-
buses too
And that
that are
factors
there.
into that contract that they have
Yes.
the site to
Well,
work
they're
on.
not charging us for a site, because it's our own.
It's our site. It just seems a big increase with, I don't know, it's substantial even at 4% with,
Two real quick things, sorry, the last page is,
I was afraid to look at that.
if we're going beyond this, I mean, these are the reductions we're looking at making.
Yeah.
It's going from really bad to catastrophic at that point, because we're already hitting classrooms with a number of teacher reductions. The other thing I would add is, unfortunately, I'm not available next week, but, the week after, Vin is around, you can reach out to me too. I know there are other questions. As they arise, don't hesitate to reach
Yeah,
out.
that's
We
what I
can
was gonna say.
give you
Any-
information, or happy to talk to you.
Yep. Please email any additional questions that come up even after tonight, so.
I wanna thank you personally for taking the
thank
time
you.
to do this, this is a big effort. I know.
Anytime.
So, I know it's a
Anytime,
pain.
we'll be
I know
here.
we're fussy, but
No,
this was important.
yeah,
For
absolutely.
the council, we don't have executive session tonight, so hopefully we're gonna end a little bit earlier, and we're gonna come back down here and look at the mill rate calculator so that we have something to be ready for Thursday's budget meeting. And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned. See you upstairs.